So could you give people the precautionary principle 101, just to back up?
Okay, let me ask you. You're Tim Ferriss flying to go to Mexico.
Okay.
You go to JFK.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you they have uncertainty about the skills of the pilot. But we think he's good, but there's uncertainty. What do you do?
I do not fly.
You're not going to get on that plane.
I'm not going to get on that
okay,
plane.
life is too important for me.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a train, you walk, maybe you ride a bicycle, take a few miles, but you're not going to get on that plane,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, you change your plans and say, okay, there are other plans or other countries too, and other planes. So that's Warren Buffett with his investments.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my precaution principle, the idea that there's an asymmetry.
Mm-hmm.
Is that there's uncertainty about certain things is not good.
Mm-hmm.
So the climate, for example, if you have uncertainty about the climate, stop these models. All right, just don't pollute. You got or try to use something else. Try to mitigate. So that's the first part of it, and people get it right away when I give them the story of a plane, or I take water. I say, this is a glass of water on the table. There's no evidence that it's poisonous.
Mm-hmm.
Would you drink it?
I mean, the wording would spook me.
There's no evidence that. But when you tell them, hey, you should worry about GMOs, they say there's no evidence they're harmful. Yeah, but there's no evidence that they're not harmful. Okay, so the asymmetry, where you put the burden of the asymmetry on, that's the precautionary principle. But then what we did is we noticed a lot of people. In fact, it was a counter precautionary principle because a lot of people were invoking it for nothing. To say we're going to have a non-naive precautionary principle by delineating the areas where you should exercise such precaution systematically as a planet or as a communal group. And what are they? Number one, you need fat tails. Now, what does fat tail mean? Let me explain to you. Let's say you go to planet Mars. Okay, Elon would help you get there. You have connection.
Yeah.
And you have no news from Earth. And then on the way back, you hear that 1 billion people died. Okay. Which one is more likely to be the cause? Ebola or car accidents?
Ebola.
Now, but on a given day, you hear Joe Smith died today. What's more likely, Ebola or a car accident?
Car accident.
Car accident. There you go. That's fat tails. Fat tails. You have to identify, you do things backwards. If you hear of a big thing, where did it come from? So you identify, and you hedge against these. Okay. So they have different dynamics because they scale differently. So in the Black Swan, I showed the difference with the following metaphor. There are environments where you may have a large deviation, but it's not going to be consequential because it can't be very big. So if I take 1,000 people and put them on a scale and add to that sample the largest human being you can find on the planet, how much of the total will he or she represent? Say it's 30 basis points, nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
And then if you go from 1,000 to 10,000, it dilutes completely. So you can have a tail event, but it's not going to be consequential. Extremistan is different. Extremistan, if you gather 1,000 people and add to that sample the wealthiest person on the planet, how much of the total will he or she represent?
Yeah,
all of it.
There'd be a rounding error.
Basically,
there'd be a rounding error. I mean, there'd be on average on the planet Earth, all right? There'd be in total, maybe they have 2 or 3 million in total, and then you have 100 and some billion right next to it. So this is where you have to focus on environment that produce these fat tails. And this is what Mark did with Universa. Universa is named after the universal mechanism that generates fat tails. Okay, that was the name of the so everything we're in it basically intellectually everything all details. So we have to identify what produces fat tails in the financial markets and why it's getting thicker. Fat tails means that you have the greatest contribution comes from smallest number of events. So concentration. Like, for example, you have a lot of people, all the wealth come from one person. Well, it so happened that under fat tails, the models that we use for risk management on Wall Street are BS. This is why I have a lot of enemies. This is why I have to protect myself against reputational damage, all right? So because all the economists say to me, all their models are based on that.
Mm.
So what is fat-tailed? Practically everything in the socioeconomic life is fat-tailed.
Mm.
What is not fat-tailed? Number of calories we're going to eat tonight. How many calories can we have in one day tonight?
I mean, we can only go for the gold. I'd say we could each down a few thousand calories a piece.
2,000.
Yeah.
Say I go 3,000 for me, all right?
Yeah.
I can play with fat and stuff. 3,000. That's nothing. How many calories do I consume a year?
Yeah, it's
not a single day is going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Can you lose all your money in a single day?
Yes.
There we go. So you have two environments, and they're separable.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why the universal approach, it makes things separable, right? The fact that you can identify what is fat-tailed.
Mm-hmm.
You identify where models don't work. You can identify where you have to understand, and you have to use more refined tools to figure out stuff. And then also in fatness of tails, number one, pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, wars.
Pandemics.
Close second.
Mm.
Wars and pandemics. Okay.
And so you can use that to prioritize application of the precautionary principle, or
bingo. And let me tell you how. For example, if cancer is thin tails,
mm-hmm.
nuclear thin tail. If you can diversify it, it's thin tails.
Mm-hmm.
If you can have 1,000 nuclear reactors, all right. If you can insure it rather than one, it is thin tail. If you can insure it, it's thin tail. If you can't insure it, non-insurable, fat tails.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that are believed to be very risky, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Like nuclear for me. I mean, not for one of my co-authors, but I'll settle it with him with a beer or some. What's it English?
Rupert Reed is a
yeah.
co-author of the, and also a major character in the book.
Yeah,
he's a very environmentally focused person. He's a leader in climate these days, and he told me that's one thing that he disputed. The precautionary principle paper was Nassim,
which was written with him first, drinking
single malt scotch
in an English pub in somewhere in northern England,
in East
Anglia, where
Anglia,
the portions are like smaller than what they give you for espresso in Italy. You know, the espresso, like you sip them. So so we had to have like
20 of them.
It's like with you and the eggs, all right? So to go back to the insurable, so we don't have to worry about it. And a very simple example I give that when Ebola started, or later on when COVID started, people were using the arguments, 3,000 Americans die every year drowning in a swimming pool. That was something by the guy called Dr. Phil. Should we shut down pools? At the time, less than 1,000 Americans had died of COVID. And then I presented the following argument. I said, if I die drowning in a swimming pool, the odds of my neighbor drowning in her or his swimming pool has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
If I die of COVID, the odds of my neighbor dying of COVID has increased.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that transmission that makes it fat-tailed.
Mm-hmm.
You see, that mechanism of transmission. Sure. So this is why you cannot compare, as basically the press in the beginning, the so-called established press, was against our ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was racist against China. They could not distinguish between risks of car accidents and heart attacks and risks of things spreading. This is why, for example, I am in favor of vaccines. The risk is thin-tailed. And I'm against GMOs because they spread in the environment.